My name is Jack Henderson, and I've built a property portfolio of over 50 million bucks before the age of 30 years old. And my company, Henderson Advocacy, purchases hundreds and hundreds of investment properties every single year for our clients. And this week, I went live on my YouTube channel and broke down people's scenarios live for everyone to hear. We talk through how to maximize your borrowing capacity, how to maximize your investments, how to use cash efficiently when you are investing in property, how important valuations are when you are growing your portfolio, and just overall how to set yourself up for a better financial future. And if you are serious about property, investing, and strategy, watching this video is going to make you a better investment, and that is a guarantee. Now, let's not wait any longer. Let's jump straight into it. I have $1 million cash and can borrow $400,000 from the bank. Should I buy a property for $1 million or push up to 1.35? I don't have any property yet. So if you have $1 million in cash, like you said, okay, cash, and you only have $400,000 in borrowing capacity, your $1 million is buying the majority of the property and you're getting $400,000 from the bank. Not that great, right? Because the great thing about property is the leverage component of it. Now, if we go down here, there is this thing called a lease doc loan. And what a lease doc loan does is a lease doc loan allows you to buy a property within a structure. Let's say it's a proprietary limited company. Okay? You buy a property in here, it's generally a commercial asset, and instead of the bank looking at you as the individual to service the debt, they just simply look at the rental income that the asset is going to generate to work out the serviceability. Now, let's assume that we can use that $1 million to go and buy a property for $2.5 million. Okay? The $2.5 million, we put down a 30% deposit, so we use $750,000 of this $1 million worth of cash. We have $250 left over for stamp duty costs and a little buffer. Now the banks will generally, so if we say $2.5 million in here, 2.5 million, and let's say we get a 6.5% rental yield on that, the banks will allow you to put in $750 of cash, and they will lend to you $1.75 million. 1.75 mil in there. Which then means you've gotten, you said 400 grand from the bank, 4 times would be 1.6 million, you get 1.75 million, and you put in 750 of your cash and bought a $2.5 million property versus a $1.4 million property. So you've essentially gotten a property value worth $1.1 million more, and you've used a little bit less cash. So in scenarios like you're in, which is like obviously not a huge amount of income because you can only borrow 400 grand, which is fine. Income is probably important to you as well. Like if you have a property that pays you, that's a good thing. Like this property here at a 70% LVR. So let's assume we're paying, on our debt here, we've got 175. We're paying 6% interest on that. 60 grand, what is that? 30 is 90. Let's say we're paying 100,000 in interest per annum. This is rough numbers. Okay, 100,000 in interest, and we're also going to assume, like in that example that someone said, the the tenant is paying all of the outgoing. So we just got interest cost at 6% interest only, and the property at 2.5 million is bringing us 6.5% in yield, which means 6.5% per million is 65,000. So it's 65, 135, half of 65 is 32.5. So that's virtually bringing us in 195K in income, which means the difference between our costs of 100,000 and our income is 195K. We've got $95,000 of income that property is generating us per annum. Obviously there's vacancy periods in there. There's bloody all these things that, you know, you've obviously got to work out, but this is a great example for someone that's in that position. $1 million of cash, can only get 400K borrowing, not ideal, likely to be resi. If you use a lease doc loan, they'll just use the income that the property generates, should be able to get somewhere between 60 and 70% as a loan to value ratio. Put in 750, borrow 1.75. The 1.75 is going to cost us roughly 6% interest only. That's 100 grand of of interest, but it's going to be bringing a 6.5% as a net yield, 195 in income. Bob's your uncle, Mort is your aunt. Hey Jack, in the process of renovating an apartment in Sydney, when finished, do you recommend a desktop valuation or an in-person valuation? That is a very, very good question. Essentially what happens when you go and get a property renovated, you then go and order valuations. Okay, that's how I can illustrate it. So let's say these are the lenders: ANZ, CBA, NAB, Macquarie, Westpac, Bank West. Here's the thing that a lot of people don't understand about valuations. This is your house here. Or let's assume this is your apartment, okay? You can order 2 valuations from each one of these lenders, and every single one of them will be different, I guarantee it. Every single one of them. So, ANZ, you can do in-person, desktop. CBA, in-person, desktop. NAB, in-person, desktop. You get the point. So, you can have 2 valuations with every single bank, okay? And every single one of them are going to value your property likely at a different value. So here's the process that we run. We do a renovation. The first thing that we do is we go and order desktop valuations from all of the lenders before we do in-person valuations. Because sometimes you'll get a really good desktop valuation, okay? This is a big hack. So you go and order desktop valuations through ANZ, CBA, NAB, Macquarie, Westpac, all of them, okay? I'm assuming 80% loan to value ratio on this as well. So order desktops. If you get a really good desktop valuation, and when I say really good, like if you think the market value is 1.3 and you get a desktop at 1.35, that's a really good valuation. Do not go and order an in-person valuation. Use the desktop. Okay? If you get shit desktop valuations, then go through and order in-person valuations. Now, when the valuer comes to the property, make sure you are prepared with all of the comparable sales. Now, the comparable sales need to be settled sales, not properties that have sold and not settled yet. So settled sales, ideally they're in the last 3 months, so in the last sort of 90 days. And ideally, you handpick good comparable sales. So what happens when you order a valuation is ANZ will tender it out. So they go, hey, we need a valuation done at John's place. They will push that out to say 10 valuation firms. It'll be like CBRE, it might be Preston Rowe Patterson. There's so many different ones. So they push them out, and then essentially one valuation company picks it up, and then they go and do the valuation. One valuation company does it, let's say it's CBRE, they come and value your property. There's a good chance that CBRE valuer is not even a local. They don't even live locally. They don't even know the market. All they know is they look on real estate and domain or whatever their portals are that they use, RP data and stuff. And they go, oh yeah, this property looks like this, we're going to value it. And I can assure you most valuers will value your property down. They will not try and value it up. So desktop valuations first, then in-person valuations. When the in-person valuers come, make sure you are prepared with your comparable sales, how much you spend on the property, and obviously they need to be settled sales. And order all of these banks, right? Because I can assure you, like we've had instances. I had an instance personally recently where NAB valued the property, which is we ended up using NAB in the end. 3.15 is what they value one of my properties at, which allowed me to pull out 500,000 in equity. ANZ valued it at fucking 2.7 or something. CBA valued it at 2.9. So if I only ordered one valuation with one bank because I was, that was the bank that I used, I would have left hundreds of thousands on the table. And then you expedite that out, 5, 10, 15, 20 properties that you might own. There's millions of dollars difference, right? So anyway, that's my valuation tick. Desktops first with every lender. If you get a really good desktop, use it. Even if it is a renovated property, use it. Don't get an in-person one. If they're not great, get the in-person. Make sure you're prepared when they come though. Okay? Also ask them, oh, you live locally? Nah, I live in Bankstown. Awesome, man. That's great. Hi, Jack. What's your thoughts on joint purchase of IP with a sibling to share mortgage and risk? I think it's good. I think the most important thing is having everyone that goes in with the right intentions, right? So like, here is Rose. Rose is here. That's Rose. Rose looks very pretty. She's got nice hair. There she is. This is Rose's brother Thorn. You like that? So there's Rose, right? They want to go buy a property. Whoa. Okay, bang. They're all in. They go 50%. It looks like low risk. All right, Rose is here. Thorn is here. Now what happens is we go 10 years down the track And Thorn goes, Rose, I know I said I was going to buy this property and hold it with you for 20 years, but I found myself a partner, okay? And we want to buy our own home, and we can't buy our own home if we own this property together, so I'm going to sell it. And Rose goes, well, I don't want to sell it, Thorn. I want to keep the property because it's a great property, all right? And then that's when the issues happen, okay? Rose doesn't have enough money to buy Thorn out or serviceability. Thorn wants to sell it, but Rose doesn't want to sell it because Rose then might be able to get back into the marketplace. So the most important thing is before you go into the transaction, you get a very, very simple heads of agreement, contract, whatever you want to call it, through a lawyer that says, if this happens, this is the outcome. If that happens, this is the outcome. If this happens, that is the outcome. I don't care if it's your sibling, your fucking long lost cousin, whatever it is, anyone you go into a deal with, agree the terms up front, okay? Because I can assure you, this is not for when times are good, this is when times are bad, okay? And no one wants them to be bad, but 99% of the time they turn out not that great. Okay, so that is what I would say. It's a great thing to do, but have the difficult conversations up front and then go into it. I've been through it. I've had a business partner, no shareholder agreement, all that type of stuff. Not ideal. Thoughts on rooming house strategy. My thoughts on the rooming house strategy is it's very good for cash flow, obviously, because, you know, you buy a residential asset, let's assume it's got 6 to 8 rooms in it, you rent out per room versus the whole property, and your rental yield is much higher. Now, the downside to the rooming house strategy is that your future buyer will be an investor. Because why is an owner-occupier ever going to buy a rooming house to live in, right? It's not going to happen. So when you sell to an investor buys the property likely how you are buying the property, which is based on a yield. Which means, you know, they're not going to go and buy a rooming house at a 2% rental yield. They want to buy a rooming house at a 5% rental yield. So your growth is likely not going to be as strong as an owner-occupier property or a property that appeals to an owner-occupier buyer. But what we have done in the past is, let me draw a house for you. Ready, Joel? This is going to be my house. So, this is Jack's house. Or Jack's client's house. All right? When you have... that is terrible. When you have an existing house like this, which all they've done is convert the inside of it to a rooming house. So let's say that this is going to be... Okay, that's the front of the house, just an FYI. And this is now the floor plan. So, that is the door... You come in here like this, here it is, hallway, and you have rooms. Let's assume this is a little, yeah, cool. And this is like a living area. So bedroom 1, bedroom 2, bedroom 3, bedroom 4. And this is the existing floor plan of a house. And they've just turned the existing floor plan into what is now allowed to be a rooming house. Now they've got the approvals, tick for approvals. And they've used an existing owner-occupier home. So they now get an increase in yield because instead of maybe renting this house out for $800 a week, they might rent each room out for $350, $400 a week, right? Which would give them $1,600 of rental income. So during the time of ownership, you can hold this, get the increased rental income. It's amazing, helps you pay down the debt faster, etc., etc. But then when you go and sell the property in the future, you don't want to sell it as a rooming house. You want to sell it as a home that appeals to the owner-occupier demographic. So then you can reconfigure it. So for example, you'd still have it as a 4-bedroom place, but you'd have bedroom 3 here, the other bedroom here, and then this one, you'd make this then open plan living. So you'd sell it then back to an owner-occupier, so it'd be like 4 bedrooms as you walk in, then kitchen, living, dining, all this shit out here. That is the ideal scenario. We recently bought one of these in Brisbane, which is that exact thing. It's an older Queenslander-style home, and then it's been converted into a boarding house. It has the approvals in place, so it's legally allowed to do that. Incredible rental income in comparison to a standard 4-bedroom, Queenslander in this suburb in Brisbane. And then in the future, we would renovate it back to a normal house, which would then increase the value of the property and the saleability of the property. So there you have it, folks. That is my thoughts on rooming houses. What would your approach to scaling further when you've maxed out your borrowing? Currently own 4 properties. Sydney, you have 2, 100% jointly with my mum, and majority positive cash flow. Yeah, so when you're maxed out on borrowing, there's a few approaches. One of them people don't really like, which is go and make more money. So let me draw this scenario out for you. 4 properties. I'm not going to include the joint thing with mum. Let's just assume 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. And look, I'm gonna pretend that all of these properties have 500k of debt, which means total debt is 2 mil. Okay, you got $2 million of debt. It's scattered across multiple properties, and you're maxed out from a borrowing capacity point of view. What we could do is we could sell down 2 assets. Generally, you would sell the worst assets, I would say, and I'm just going to assume no fees and charges and CGT and all the rest of it, just for illustrative purposes, because it'll get too complicated. Let's say we sell these properties for $1 million and we cash out 500 grand of profit. Same thing, 500 grand of profit, and we get rid of this debt. We then use that 500 grand of profit to go and clear these properties. So now these are worth 1 million a piece, 1 million a piece, and they're debt free. And $1 million property is probably bringing you in, let's say, fucking 40 grand a year each. So they're bringing you in 80k of income. Okay, now that 80k has no repayments because they're debt free, but you now have $2 million worth of assets as opposed to $4 million worth of assets, but you've still got the same $2 million of net equity because you had $4 million of assets and you had $2 million of debt, which gave you the 50% LVR. So that obviously clears your borrowing, or that clears the debt, and would take you back to max borrowing capacity, assuming you have no other debts. Obviously, that doesn't help the situation if you are still this man here, and this man here is earning, let's say he's earning 200 grand a year per year. This guy is going to be able to borrow, I would say, about with rental income, probably around $1 million. Different banks, different amounts of money, but let's say he borrows $1 million. If you then went and bought another property in your personal name and you paid $1 million for it and you financed 100%, you are back in the same scenario, right? Because you've just used your full $1 million borrowing capacity to buy another $1 million property. You had $2 million of unencumbered assets. You've now got $1 million property that is fully debt, or all debt, I should say. And you've got $3 million worth of assets, 2 with no debt, 1 with debt or full debt, and you're in the same position. So ideally, if you want to continue to scale your portfolio, that is an ineffective approach. So what I have done, and now I don't have a serviceability issue now because obviously the income is reflective of it, but let's assume that we put this property within an entity, and this was ring fenced, meaning that it was in an entity, whether it be a company or a trust structure. Remember, get your own advice on this, as I'm just talking purely a strategy that I use. That property would be negatively geared. I would say if that property is also getting, 40 grand a year in rent, it's probably costing 60 grand a year, so it's got a $20,000 negative cash flow element on it. But we've got $80,000 up here. So we would use 20,000 out of that 80,000 to cash flow this property. Over time, the rent will increase. That will then obviously allow this property to start paying for itself, and we wouldn't need to use any of that $80,000 worth of income. But there is $80,000 sitting there that we could pay for this property with. Then, because that property is not costing you anything, and the shortfall is being paid for through the rental income, you're still earning your $200,000 a year, and because you've now protected your borrowing capacity and you've got asset protection with the trust, you can essentially do the same thing again. Set it up, entity, and $1 million. Okay, and then let's assume it's the same scenario. This property costs you 20 grand a year. You've used 20 grand from your 80, which means there's 60 left over. You could then fund that with the other 20,000, which would give you $40,000 left over, etc., etc. And you could do this, essentially 4 times if they all cost $20,000 each, and you'd then have $6 million worth of assets versus $4 million worth of assets up here, and they'd all be paid for through the rental income that the unencumbered 2 were paying for. So that is how you can essentially free up your borrowing capacity, sell down some properties, eliminate all the debt in your personal name if you can. That will then take you back to max serviceability, assuming you have no other debt. And then this is a strategy that works to help maximize your borrowing capacity, but it's not for everyone. Okay, so get your own advice on that, because this is just what I do. Mate, who are your favorite second and third tier lenders? What are the highest interest rates you think the average punter should get up to? So it's a good question. I will do this graph for you guys. Okay, so let's say that we have, I'm just going to use round numbers. So let's say we've got $1 million. $1 million here. That is with lender number one, and lender number one offers us a 5.5% interest rate. Let's say we then go to a second tier lender that gives us a 6% interest rate, but they'll give us a bump up in borrowing capacity. They'll give us 1.25 million. And then let's say that we go to like the extreme, we're going to be paying 7%. This might be with like a Latrobe or something like that, a low doc facility. But on that facility, let's say that they then lend us $1.5 million. So 5.5% rate, major lender, they'll lend us $1 million, 6% rate at 1.25 million. That might be a second tier lender, but still a full doc loan. And then a 7% low doc loan with a non-bank lender. They'll lend us $1.5 million. So obviously there is a cost associated with each of this debt. Now, because we are borrowing different amounts, the repayments will obviously differ. But if we said here, we're going to be paying $55,000 a year in interest. This one we're going to be paying 72, let's say roughly $75,000 a year in interest. And then here we're going to be paying $105,000 in interest. Okay, so 5.5%, $55,000 in interest, but we've got $1 million property. 6%, 1.25, we're going to be paying $75,000 a year. 7% interest on a $1.5 million loan, we'll be paying $105,000. Now, if we just assumed that all of these properties grew at 7% per annum, which is around about the Australian average, essentially, they all cost more. So we're going to assume that you can service the debt, but obviously growth on a larger asset base over a long period of time should make you more money. Now, remember, this is not financial advice. This is just Jack dribbling. $1 million property over that same period of time goes from being worth 1 mil to 2 mil. Mate, these textures are really good. A $1.25 million property goes from being worth 1.25 million to 2.5 million dollars, and then a $1.5 million property, no surprises there, is worth $3 million over that same period of time. Okay, it's assuming property all grows at the same dollar value. Now, over that same period of time, we have our holding costs, and I'm just going to assume no rental income. Okay, we're just going to factor in holding costs. So 10 years at 105,000, that is $1,050,000. So 1050 minus rent. 75,000 is 750. Well, I fucked that up. 750, cool. And then 55,000 is $550,000. Now, if you look at what it's cost us versus what it's earned us, in this scenario, the net number is 2 million minus the 550. We end up with $1.45 million net. In the next scenario, we had 2.5 million. We need to minus our 750, so we end up with $1.75 million net, which means we are about $300,000 up from our initial example. And then on our last example, we're paying a 7% rate. We end up with $3 million total minus our $1,050,000. We end up with $1.95 million total, which then brings us up another $200,000 on the one below at a $1.25 million purchase price. So as you can see, obviously rates are one part of the equation. That is the cost of the debt. But if we can get a better quality asset, assuming we have the deposit for that, even though it will cost us more to own, it should make us more over the long run. And then if we look at our overall net numbers, we end up much better off by spending more on property, assuming you can service the debt and all the rest of it. So don't just focus on rate, focus on what that rate will allow you to go and buy. I can assure you, I have had some horrendous interest rates with second tier and non-bank lenders. So there you go. Good afternoon, Jack. Just bought a house with a guarantor at $750. How much cash would you build up in an offset account? Is there a guidance, or what percentage would you aim for? It's an interesting one. It really depends on your risk appetite. And remember, I'm not a financial advisor, but in terms of cash, you want to have enough cash in your offset account or in your savings account, whatever you want to call it, to make sure that you can live your life if something was to happen. Now, all of your cash should sit in your offset account against your owner-occupier property or not your non-deductible debt. So as you are continuing to accumulate cash, it should be sitting in your offset account. This is another really good one to talk about. So let's say that we have a $1 million, this is our loan right here, okay? And over here is our offset account. So we have our loan of $1 million and we have our offset account. And let's assume that we are saving 10 grand a month, just so we keep it all round. We want to have all of our 10,000s going into our offset account. And even if we were paying minimum repayments on this $1 million loan, or maybe it was an interest-only loan, who knows? You want to have all your money go into your offset account, and essentially every single month, that goes from 10K to 20K to 30K. And essentially what happens is, because you've got more and more money sitting here in your offset account, you're paying less and less interest here on your loan, which means more and more money in the offset, less and less interest, more and more money in the offset, less and less interest. And that's essentially what you should do. So it's not like having a minimum amount of money is, or a maximum amount of money, I should say, in your offset account is the important thing. But let's say you then get to a point where you've got 200 grand in your offset account and the loan on the property is still $1 million. Essentially what we would do, instead of just pulling this $200,000 out of the offset to go and buy a new property and use that cash, and then essentially what we would do is pull the cash out, we'd have less debt on the investment property, assuming we bought something for $1 million, we'd only have $800,000 worth of debt. But now we would have just increased the loan amount on our owner-occupier property from being essentially $800,000 or paying interest on $800,000 back to $1 million. So we're essentially decreasing the debt on tax-deductible investment debt, and we're increasing the debt on non-deductible owner-occupier debt. So instead of doing that and buying a new investment over here, essentially what we want to do is we want to use that 200 to actually smash down that loan, pay it off, bring that loan down to 800K. And then what we do is we do a refinance, cash out the $200,000 as a separate loan split. So here, and then we have $200,000 of equity. And then when we use that equity for a purchase, the interest on that equity then becomes tax deductible. And that's what debt recycling is. Thanks for sticking around to the end of the video. If you want to tune in to the next live, you need to head over to my profile, tap on the live tab, and you'll see when the next live stream is happening. Make sure you click on the notify me tab, and you can tune in live and you can ask any question around your personal circumstance, and I will do my best to answer it live right then and there.